You're listening to Signals from the Core, a podcast about adventuring in the core sector of the Mongoose Traveller 2nd Edition role-playing game. This is where the bureaucracy is dangerous, the nobles are lethal, and where power, paranoia, and prestige collide. I'm Captain Aurelius, and I'll be your host. In each episode, we explore the tangled heart of the Third Imperium through original story hooks, people of interest, encounters, locations, and the tools you need to bring high-stakes, low-trust campaigns to life. If your crew is headed for the throne world, buckle up, because here in the core, secrets don't stay buried. Not for long. On our last episode, we walked through how to launch the Singularity campaign with new travelers. Your players have just rolled up at the start of the campaign. Recruitment vignettes, suspicious recruiters, random tables to give each player a different reason for being on Capitol when the meeting happens with Minan Holdov, an assistant vice-chancellor, who tells the travelers they've all come highly recommended and would they be interested in passage to Onon to meet with a noble who needs a ship's crew for a prestigious vessel called the Ventura Fortuna. But what if your group isn't new? What if they've been adventuring together for a while? Maybe they've got their own ship, established patrons, steady employment, their own running storyline they don't want to throw out just because Singularity is the next campaign in the rotation. The same techniques work for established groups, but the shape of how they work has to change. And that's what this episode is all about. A quick recap of where we left off for context. The Singularity campaign opens with the travelers being summoned to Capitol for a meeting with an important patron who turns out to be Assistant Vice Chancellor Hudolv, who I just mentioned. But he's only like part patron. He's really an intermediary who wants to put the travelers in touch with a noble who's looking for a skilled ship's crew for that prestigious vessel, the luxury liner, that offers generous salaries, profit sharing, a tour of the core. The hook is a luxury liner posting hobnobbing with the rich, powerful, famous, or infamous. And the question is how you get your group to take the meeting in the first place, or how you get, in the previous episode, how you get each individual traveler to want to learn more and make their way to Capitol. The published version of that setup says the travelers come in response to a call from an ally or a contact, and if no character has a suitable one, you pick the highest social standing player and tell them a noble friend has called them, and that works fine. But especially for an established crew, it's worth giving it a little more thought. And again, I want to point out, this is not a weakness of Singularity. This is just kind of a thing with a lot of published campaigns that sort of, on purpose, by design, have to sort of be vague and hand-wave the setup because it's worth reiterating, every group is different, every referee is different, and the entry points into campaigns have to be sort of vague and malleable to whatever's going to work for your group. So I get that, and I don't fault Singularity for being a little vague on the handwave of you learn about it from an ally or contact. That's 100% a traditional way to kick off a published adventure campaign. So we're good. We're good. So anyway, let's dive right in to how this works when you're running the campaign as a continuation of previous adventures with an established crew. But first, if you ever want to get in touch, share what's on your mind, share ideas or thoughts on the show, send your signals to coresignalsmail@gmail.com or follow along on Blue Sky at signalsfromthecore.bsky.social. If you like the show, remember, rate and review it, especially on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really helps give the show a signal boost, and I appreciate it a great deal. I read all the reviews, so send me a review. Hopefully 5 stars. If you hate the show, just don't review it. Just skip it. But if you like it, give it a 5-star review and just say something like, "Great show." That's all it takes. Now, let's dig in. Now, the first approach is familiar. If you want to run it if you want to run what I like to call the recruitment sequence as a role-playing vignette. For a veteran group, the recruitment has to play out differently. The structure of the new traveler approach that we talked about last week is built on the assumption that the recruiter has to find and interact with each traveler as the setup. The recruiter or recruiters approach, they make contact, they deliver the pitch, the travelers react. The whole structure assumes that the travelers are reachable, but not yet really connected with each other. So it's individual vignettes and individual scenes, which, like I said last time, is how I kind of prefer to start off a campaign or an adventure with new crews, working up to the moment of convergence. You know, that kind of 4 travelers arrive at a starport, walk into a cantina. With a veteran group, the recruiter doesn't have to find each traveler. They're seeking the whole crew because the crew's already known. They have a name, they have a reputation, a ship registry, a pattern of where they take cargo, who they work for, where they put in for repairs if they have a ship, other jobs that they've done. The recruiter's problem is getting the meeting itself, getting a savvy crew to sit down with somebody they don't know when they've already been running their own business. It takes more than just knowing where to find them. It's kind of getting the hook into what's it going to take to get them to take the meeting, right? The other part at play here is the other way around that we talked about with the new travelers is you could have different recruiters for each of the different travelers, which kind of plays into this thin line that referees should be seeding here out of the gate of a little conspiracy going on of the manipulation, where many different people are all kind of working to the same purpose, which will come into play deeper down the line in the campaign if you run it to its completion. Now, part of me, as I think about Singularity, is the really appealing part is the sandboxiness of that first act, which is where I kind of intend to spend a lot of time. Eventually, I mean, I'm sure that, you know, we'll play deeper and deeper in, but man, there's a lot of fun to be had running a luxury liner throughout the core with individual adventures stemming from who the passengers are, what happens on some of the layovers. Like every single one of those is an opportunity for a ton of adventure. And I really want to settle in and play that for a while. So I'm not trying to mainline the overall campaign here, but it's worth noting, and you know, we'll probably hit on this a couple of times. It's worth noting that a referee should understand where the campaign is going so that they can help tie some of the loose ends together, right? So anyway, I digress. Instead of running individual vignettes, the veteran group of the recruitment, the veteran group version of the recruitment sequence works as more of like a 3-beat escalation, right? That builds across the same evening or a week, right? With the crew kind of all experiencing it together. So it's kind of like one point of contact, or maybe a couple of different points of contact, all pointing them in the same direction. But the point is, you're not doing this with 4 to 5 separate travelers, or how many travelers are in your crew. You're recruiting a crew here. So the first beat is that the recruiter should be reaching out through a channel the crew already uses, like their broker, a regular fixer, a harbor master who's a contact at the port where the crew usually puts in for refits, or who has been there before. Some sort of patron, right? If they haven't been crewing a ship, they've sort of just been doing odd jobs. Just a contact they've already made should be the one to reestablish or kind of do the handoff to this new recruiter. Like, make it apparent that the recruiter has gone through somebody the crew trusts to deliver this message. And, but it should be clear that the trust isn't transferable, right? Just because, there may be some skepticism here. The crew still doesn't know the recruiter, but the channel is clean, right? So maybe that will give them more of a reason to take it seriously. The crew reads a message, and whoever this is, they know who your broker is. They know they have a line into your crew. They knew to go through Kareem at the harbor because they know you. Anyway, I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this, but you get the point. Make it come through a familiar channel to have it be more legit. The second beat is the meeting itself, somewhere the crew chooses on terms the crew sets, right? Because the crew has the standing to kind of set the terms, respect that they have a reputation, right? Maybe even make it so that the recruiter shows up to them, because I think one of the things to consider, and again, your mileage may vary. This could go either way, but the way I kind of think about it is, there's an element to which, if you're having an established crew, that trope of, they reached out, even if it's through an established channel. If you're meeting the recruiter at a place, there's always going to be that sort of, in the back of your head thinking, is this an ambush? Is this a setup? So if you kind of make it so that the recruiter says, I'll meet you anytime, any place. I just want to get in touch. I got this hot new lead for you. That's a way to approach it. And you can role play it that way. The idea is try to get the travelers away from thinking that it's an ambush kind of setup. The recruiter should seem suspicious, but not in that way, not in a dangerous way, just in a, what the hell's going on with this guy? Why does he know some of these things, right? Like that notion of him being suspiciously well informed. They know the names of the crew members, some of the jobs over the years. They know about the contract, a contract that ended badly or whatever. They just should have a few details that make the crew wonder, like, how does this guy know us? Like, I didn't know our reputation was that big that, this guy should know some of these things. And they just should mention them in passing to kind of to play up the excitement of, why they're recruiting them for this lucrative opportunity. the recruiter should be kind of establishing, without saying so explicitly, that the people behind this offer have done their research on the crew and they come really highly sought after. That establish that, kind of make it appear like they are being really courted here for this. They're highly sought after. The third beat is with the offer itself. It should be sort of irresistible. Pay is good. Patron high rank. Prestigious, vessel. We'll get to that. But they should be kind of vague, right? Because you don't want to undercut the scene with the assistant vice chancellor, but just be like, hey, there's an opportunity for you on capital. The prestige is there. Terms are flexible. Pay is great. And it's worth your while just to listen to it. Get your ass to capital. So that structure kind of just helps you move the established crew in the right direction as one kind of scene that you can kind of play out there. Instead of all the individual scenes with each traveler. I guess that's the broader point. Point is, it should come across as an opportunity, a reassuring opportunity, that the recruiter is excited to impart to these travelers, and not something that's threatening. So be delicate there. But the point of this is, you're role-playing this. This is your role-playing entry into get them to capital. And the angles into that, the specific shape for how that recruitment vignette will play out, will obviously vary a lot depending on the kind of crew you've got. So just like with the new traveler vignettes will vary based on each traveler's career, the veteran group varies based on what the crew's been doing together, what their reputation looks like, and what channels they actually use. So I share some kind of examples of how it could land for different kind of crews, just as some thought starters, some ideas. Like if they've been running a free trader crew, running tramp routes, they could be approached, like I said, by their regular broker, who's been handed a sealed introduction by someone they won't name, and with kind of a hook that the patron is willing to triple your usual rates for a long contract that calls at every world you've ever worked. Learn more, meet me here. If the crew's been a mercenary outfit, between contracts, they could be contacted through their regular ticketing agency by a recruiter looking for an experienced unit whose discretion has been verified for protective work that doesn't appear in any military registry. They've been a salvage crew working on wrecks from recent deep space operations. They could be contacted by their normal repair yard broker, who knows that what you pulled out of some Hulk last spring, and has a client who wants to know what else you might be able to pull off for the right kind of contract. Just kind of seed out reasons to make it worth their while. Point is, whatever your crew's been doing, seed it back to that. Seed it back to a job that they've done really well, and tie it somehow to, hey, they know about this. They know about what happened on that job. And that's what got you this opportunity. So go check it out on Capital. And obviously, it's easier if things have been going rough for the travelers, right? If they've kind of been down on their luck, kind of lost their shirts on a couple of jobs, things haven't worked out well, they're going to be more apt to kind of take the opportunity. So again, this approach with the role-playing entryway really depends on connecting it to previous jobs. Another approach altogether could be doing away with a new recruiter altogether and just make it an established contact, right? Somebody they already know. If they have somebody at the Travelers Aid Society or the respected broker, right? Just cut the middleman out and go straight to the source of somebody they've previously worked with that now has a hot new lead, and they could just pass it directly to the traveler. That might work even better, right? Especially for a veteran group who, maybe a little suspect a lot or be hesitant, right? To take on new contracts from strangers, right? So anyway, you get your group, you'll be able to kind of finesse this the way that's going to be most effective for that group. The drawback of approaching things that way is you don't really get to precede the idea that the new recruiter knows a little too much, right? So you're just kind of like losing that foreshadowing element, but that's not the end of the world. You'll get to that. It's totally fine. So whatever's going to work best, if you prefer role playing your way into this angle, it's kind of like feel it out at your table, because everybody's table is different, and the way that's going to get this job to appeal to your crew is going to vary depending on past history, contacts, the way things have been going. While one way to handle the recruitment moment for a veteran crew is for the offer to be tailored to whatever the crew has been wanting out of their next assignment, the other technique I want to walk through is that same randomization approach we talked about last time, but for an established group. For this, the structure on last episode just needs to change, because it's not coming at the end of character generation. It's coming almost out of the blue, where you make it a turning point for the crew between jobs. When you're thinking about developing tables or hooks designed for established crews already adventuring together, the same rules apply as with the role-playing vignettes. Consider the context of how your travelers have been doing, what they've been up to, and decide which is the best approach for your group. So one approach is for the offer that comes when things are going well. The lead that kind of pulls the group toward capital because the prospect is too interesting to pass up. The second one is for the offer that comes when things have gone sideways, when the group's options have narrowed and the meeting on capital is the way out of whatever has them cornered. Again, similar theme, same destination, either way, just different reasons to get them heading there. When your travelers are easygoing and kind of like to go with the flow, the first approach works like a charm. But sometimes you've got to pull out a few more underhanded tactics to get them to go along, if you know what I mean. For travelers who have, especially for travelers who have their own ship and have had no issues taking on their pick of jobs, how are you going to get them to agree to give up that ship and climb aboard a new one, for example? Right? Because that's what's at stake here, to get them to go along with this campaign. If one of your players has been captaining a far trader or a subsidized merchant running side routes and tramp freight off the beaten path throughout the core, what's going to entice them to sign on to another captain's crew on a luxury liner of all things? Like, if it's going to be that much of a shift, this entry into Singularity has to be a little more compelling, so to speak. So now we need a similar approach to what we did last time, but one that leads with misfortune as the rationale for taking the job. Complications, mishaps, or trouble that lead them to take the meeting on capital. Something that leaves them with few options. Maybe their past has caught up with them, and the referee can tie some of these complications back to past events. Enemies seeking revenge, rivalries getting the upper hand. They've run out of second chances. This is especially useful for when your group, like I said, has their own ship and has been operating around the core with some degree of autonomy and self-sufficiency. This is a way, even if temporarily, to pull the carpet out from under them and force a status change. A useful design rule for these is the misfortune should be either temporary or partial. Right? A ship grounded for repairs, not impounded forever. A patron displeased, not dead or lost forever. Right? A legal entanglement that can be sorted out in time. Right? You're not sending them to prison, but you've handcuffed them. You've kind of shackled them. The referee needs to be able to lift the pressure when the storyline ends, right? They need to be able to see that there's a way back to the status quo, that they're kind of taking this campaign or this job as a stopgap. Otherwise, the offer is going to become a trap rather than kind of a way out. They need to see it as a way out or a bridge, to get by while they're waiting for other things to kind of land. The hooks you use should be calibrated to that. Each option, when you're building your table, should create pressure for the duration of your upcoming campaign, and each one should leave the door open for the group to recover their previous arrangements once the job or campaign is over, if they choose to do that. Don't close doors. Just kind of put obstacles in their way. Beyond that core rule about temporary or partial pressure, there are a few other things worth thinking through while you're designing these tables. The first is that the pressure should be on something the group shares. Your group's ship belongs to all of them, even if one traveler's name is on the title. Or the reputation they've built is collective. The network of NPCs they've cultivated is shared. The patron they've been working for is the whole crew's. So when you put pressure on those things, the costs get distributed across the table. They're all in it together. Every player has a stake in figuring out what to do about it. Compare that with a hook that hits one specific traveler, like a personal medical crisis, a family emergency that puts them home with an addiction that's caught up with them. Those can be powerful in the right moment. They can play a role, but they concentrate on the cost or misfortune on an individual. And that's, that gets into sticky territory. So make it a group pressure point, a deliberate choice that the crew has to make together. And while the pressure shouldn't be permanent, it should have some legs to it. It shouldn't be a quick fix, right? You got to make it feel like this is going to take a while to resolve so that they feel open to taking on a job like will be presented to them. And as you're building through the tables and thinking through what options would fit, don't make a lot of them that are necessarily completely out of the blue. Make the misfortune connect to what the group has actually been doing, or hooks that will be more effective when they tie back to past events. Even if you're kind of making them vague, call back to enemies, patrons who've been burned. Like, not every job goes 100% according to plan. Bubble that stuff back as you're thinking of entries to build on your tables. The dice, like, think about it like the dice can pick the type of pressure, but you leave room for you to pick the specific source drawn from the campaign history that the group has actually lived through, so that the hook feels earned and gives the players the satisfaction of recognizing what they're paying for, what the comeuppance is tied to. Build in different categories of pressure on the table itself, so the dice can hand you something different each time you run this. There are a few angles worth covering: pressure on the ship, pressure on the network of relationships the group depends on, pressure on their finances, pressure on their legal standing, or from a specific named threat reappearing, pressure from many small things going wrong at once. If your table covers all these angles, then the dice can produce a different campaign launch every time you use this. Like, this should be a repeatable sort of resource, or at least build a structure around it that makes it easy to kind of categorize things as you're thinking about this as a launch framework into any sort of campaign where you need to be able to pull strings and play with emergent sort of opportunities. That's the value of having a table that works with you, that lets you kind of shape the misfortune. Then in this is really important to think about, is save the most dramatic outcomes for rare rolls at the tail end of the bell curve. So think about the averages of dice rolling, right? If you're using a 2d6 distribution, the middle results come up about half the time, and the tails come up, only a few percents each. So keep that in mind, and put the typical kinds of pressures in the middle, and then the ones that, should be rare show up in the rare slots. The ones that should feel like the everyday version of things have turned against us should be that middle band, and the dramatic outliers should really, be outliers on the table. The more significant, the more extreme, either on the really extreme low end or the really extreme high end. Save the really significant oh shit moments there. So that's sort of the design logic. Group level pressure, keep it based on group level pressure for their shared assets. Temporary or partial, give them that light at the end of the tunnel. Keep it as something that's going to maintain pressure throughout the campaign so that it's kind of always there. It doesn't disappear as soon as they board the Ventura Fortuna. It should always sort of linger, and keep it connected to the history of how you've been campaigning when you can manage it. Vary it enough so that the same table delivers different shapes, and then, like I just mentioned, most dramatic outcomes saved for rare rolls. So let's take a look. I'll roll a couple random ones and share with you a couple of examples from the tables that I am currently building, right? So this one is for, I'll say it's kind of like the random roll table. I'm just calling it the summons to capital, right? For travelers already adventuring in the core and a more easygoing group who you feel as the referee will be more open to taking this opportunity, right? You know your group better than I do. You're going to have groups that are just like, yeah, they're up for anything. They're going to take any job with any lead because that's how they approach the game. The table has to work less hard, right? It's just a matter of randomizing how the offer comes to them. And this is just a fun way to do that if you're kind of stumped for ideas. So let's give it a roll. Okay, that's a 7. The right rumor. A rumor reaches the group through 3 independent contacts within the same standard week. Each contact has heard a version of the same lead. A posting on a high-end vessel, prestigious, generous terms, profit sharing, taking on experienced crews. Each contact has heard the group's name mentioned in connection with it. None of them know who is doing the mentioning, but 2 of them mentioned that the inquiries seem to be coming from the same chancellery on Capital. So that points them to Capital. What's going on there? All right, that's an 8. An old name. A name from the group's past, a former patron, a one-time client, an old benefactor has surfaced on Capital and is asking after them specifically. The message comes through the right channels, names the group's current ship, and references a piece of work the group did 3 or 4 years ago that almost nobody should remember. Whoever is asking has done their reading up. The meeting is scheduled, and travel is paid. Their expenses are paid. So, there you have it. Just a couple of examples on the, calling it, I don't really have a name for it, but this is for the easygoing. You just need an excuse to get them to Capital, and they're kind of going to be open to whatever. Now we get into what I call the misfortune hooks. This is for the kind of the reluctant who are going to be like, I don't need this job. I've got my own ship. I'm doing my thing. We're getting the jobs we like. Doesn't matter. Ooh, that's a 4. Okay. Repoed. The mortgage on the ship is far too overdue. Whether through legitimate late payments, the group has been juggling for months, or a clerical oversight in the financial institution's records that the group cannot prove without representation, the ship has been seized and will remain in a holding yard until back payments are received or the administrative error is corrected. The financial institution is on Capital, headquartered in the Imperial Banking District, 3 districts over from the Imperial Park. The Capital offers salary structure would cover the back payments. The group's broker has also noted that an assistant vice chancellor's office has the kind of standing that could shake loose a clerical hold faster than any solicitor the group could afford to retain. All right, now let's look at another one. Seven. Doors closing. A rival crew, syndicate, or noble house has spent the last year quietly closing doors on them. Brokerages that used to take their calls don't return them anymore. Ports that used to wave them through now hold them for hours. Insurance has become difficult. Refueling has become expensive. And 3 of their regular contacts have stopped responding. The campaign of attrition has not killed them. It's just made every routine task 3 times harder than it used to be. The offer on Capital arrives through a channel the rival has not yet thought through, or thought to close. So those are just a few options if you're looking for ideas on how to get them to bite. Now, every group is different, and it's up to the referee's discretion as to how far to push in this direction, obviously. But there's a degree to which you learn at a certain point during Singularity that the travelers have been manipulated to get them to take this job in the first place. So there are a lot of different flavors that could take on, and it gives referees many different levers to play with and how much they want to foreshadow or precede that or set that eventual reveal up, right? So some of this will tie in, like even if it's kind of heavy-handed, it will play off eventually, or play out eventually. Pay off and play out eventually. Obviously, caveat emptor, right? Your mileage may vary, all that. If you think this approach would piss your players off, don't use it. Or use it with some level of honey to curb the bitterness, right? It should, again, can't stress this enough. It should be used as a temporary predicament, not a permanent loss. We're not crashing the Enterprise or blowing up the Millennium Falcon here. No extremes necessarily. No extremes necessary. These all should be setbacks and inconveniences. Unless you want something that's going to forever change the status quo, in which case, knock yourself out, right? Like, you run your table, so you know your group. So to whatever degree this is going to be effective for your group, it's just another tool to steer them in the right direction. Especially for me, as I think this, and this is actually not applicable for my group because they don't have a ship, right? So where I just kept coming back is, man, if you've got a crew who already has a ship or already is in kind of a flow of things, how do you get them to give that up to climb aboard a luxury liner? If they're running their own ship, why would they run someone else's? And this is, you can make it really lucrative and a really enticing offer, but how would you even get them to listen to it is just kind of what I kept coming back to. So I was just thinking, well, here's a way to do that and still make it fun and emergent and kind of give yourself a whole lot of options all at once. Another circumstantial option worth kind of trotting out if the need arises is, you could make it, a crew member could be in some serious trouble, serious injury requiring extended treatment, family crisis on a distant world. Make it about that individual if a player is leaving the campaign, right, for real life reasons, or they want to, they just need to take a break. They're not going to be around for the campaign. That's another opportunity, is to tie it to that exit too. So whichever path you took, whether you're role-playing it as vignettes with your crew or you're doing it randomly on the tables, whichever path you choose, everything leads just like with it's the same campaign. So just like with the new travelers, with the crew here, eventually they arrive on Capitol and we get to the real heart of the matter, that meeting with Assistant Vice Chancellor Huldov, who tells them about the opportunity on the Ventura Fortuna and sets up the meeting with the Baron Hot Ellerfaust on. So, with the new travelers, we started with the individual reasons for why they would want to go to On to meet with the Baron about the opportunity on the Ventura Fortuna. With a crew, you don't start there. With a crew, the personal reasons, they could still play in. That's interesting. And there's a kind of a way to play that. But start with the group discussion. For the veteran group, with the shared history and experience together, they've got to make the decision together. So the question isn't just why are you, the individual, going? why is the group going? Why is the group considering this? They have a collective decision to make about whether the Ventura Fortuna is worth their time. And that decision is its own kind of piece of campaign texture. The reasons they take a job are different than the opportunities of an individual. And so, let them tell you, let them talk about it at the table, but throw some ideas out, right? Like maybe they've heard some whispers, and if you know with enough time in advance, you could seed some whispers about the Ventura Fortuna, right? Some rumors and that they're not hearing about it necessarily at the first time at this table. So they could just be like, oh, I've heard about that ship. And then, obviously some of these could stem out of the random rolls of the table we just talked about, where the profit sharing on a successful luxury liner is going to give them more than enough money to bail themselves out of the predicament they're in. That's probably one of the most powerful ones, right? And then, or you could play in with that proximity one too for the crew. Like, hey, they might be able to make some contacts on this assignment that will help them get out of whatever situation they're in, whatever complication has arisen from those roles. On the flip side, the other part could be, if things haven't been going really well for them, this could just be flat out a better opportunity for them. This could be the hottest job offer they've received in ages if they've been struggling to get by. Similarly, for the whole group, if they are kind of like on the lam or on the run or kind of looking over their shoulder, there are ideas to be played with there as well, right? Where you're just like, hey, you're going to be on the move. It's the on the move thing. It's just think about presenting these ideas to the group more so than finding, individual reasons for them. But having said that, I still think it's interesting to have the group conversation about why this makes sense for the whole crew as one stage, but then as something that is an added layer, have the quiet one-on-one conversations, like whether you do this in email separately from the table or however, get the individual idea of, why does this make sense to your character? What is it about this that you as an individual might see an opportunity in? So you can play with that too as you're thinking about ways to set up how the campaign is going to proceed. So kind of you get more to play with here when you're working with an established crew than with sort of the individual new crew who hasn't really played before. Here you get just a couple of different levers, which I really like. I love that sort of idea and that's kind of how I would play it, is get the crew to decide why it makes sense for the collective, but figure out what are some of those threads that you can pull that would be appealing to each of the individual players as their characters as well, to give you a little something more to play into. So it's like, get the crew to kind of discuss openly together why this makes sense, why this is going to be kind of, call it a year, 18 months of your time, whatever this kind of assignment is going to be. Get the group consensus on one or two of the collective reasons why it makes sense, so everybody's on the same page. But then, get them to kind of specifically tell you a little bit more. Like I said, I would do this part in email So it's not necessarily shared across the table, and it can just be something that could play out just between the referee and the player that could seed in or come back later. I think that's a really fun texture to give to what you're talking about, or what you're going for. Those individual motives just define some personal stakes that, could just really benefit down the line. So that's the established crew launch for Singularity. Recruitment that escalates, misfortune that pressures the group's shared infrastructure, personal reasons stacked underneath the collective ones, and at every step, the dice and the design choices help the crew and the players make decisions for themselves or discover new opportunities that lead to more emergent storytelling down the line. Take what works for your group, leave what doesn't. Ultimately, the Singularity campaign is a strong piece of writing by Christopher Griffen, and the techniques we've been talking about across these last 2 episodes are about giving you ways to weave it kind of more intricately or seamlessly into what's going to work at your table, whatever group you're running it for. I'm working on a couple of different ideas for next time. I'm not really sure which one I'll go with, but one of them is, since the first stop in the Singularity campaign is Capital, and I'm actively sort of prepping for how I would run it, at least the sandbox aspect of the tour through the core sector, I thought it might be fun to do a tour of Capital and do a deep dive into the throne world for next time. So let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. Write the show at coresignalsmail@gmail.com. That's coresignalsmail@gmail.com. Or follow along on Blue Sky at signalsfromthecore.bsky.social. You can find that info in our show notes, along with a link tree to make it easy to locate the show online anytime, any place we are. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. But especially rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really, really, really helps, and I appreciate it. I appreciate every one of you. Share the show with your fellow travelers. Help spread the word. Until next time, keep your clearance valid, your comms encrypted, and your gravline out of committee oversight. Stay sharp, travelers.